ingrained in their body that it becomes second nature. As Tony often says, repetition is the mother of skill. Listen now as Tony shares a story about how he helped 8-time Grand Slam champion tennis player Andre Agassi overcome his frustration after a series of losses and regain the state of absolute certainty in himself and his ability to perform at the highest level.
One of the first athletes that I worked with that got national attention was Andre Agassi. How many remember Andre? He lives here in Vegas. And Andre's a prince amongst men. He's a good human being. But when I met Andre, he was at a place of total frustration. He had become #1 in the world. He won Wimbledon. And then unexpectedly, he just plummeted. I don't remember the real number, but I think he dropped to from #1 to 21 or 22. And it was in a very short period of time. And his wrist got injured, but that wasn't it. That happened after he dropped. And his father was his manager, and he was frustrated with his father. He was actually considering quitting the sport. And he was dating Brooke Shields at the time, who had been a client of mine before. And she said, "You got to go see Tony Robbins." And he goes, "I don't need positive thinking." And Andre's normally a nice guy, but when people are frustrated, they're not real nice. And she goes, "He's not that. He's a strategist. He'll figure out what you did at your best. He'll show you." She goes, "Nothing else is working. Why don't you come see him?" So he comes to my house. I'm 31 years old. I'll never forget. He walks in my house. He shakes my hand. He sits down on my couch like this, and he just goes, "Do your And I said, "First of all, it's not I said, "Second of all, you're in my house." I said, "Third of all, the attitude could go first if you want help." I said, "Listen, I know you're frustrated. Tell me what's going on." So he tells me this tirade of upsets, his wrist, his father, all these things. And I look at him and I said, "Well, why don't we do something simple? Have you ever hit a tennis ball perfectly?" He said, "No." I said, "The attitude could go first." He goes, "Of course I have." I said, "I know you have. Do it. Close your eyes and vividly experience hitting the tennis ball perfectly 10 times. And don't bullshit me. Do it full tilt like it's the best swing of your life, where you actually feel it, see it, experience it." And he did. About 4 or 5 in, he starts to get a little smile. Because as he changed his focus, it changed his physiology. Even thinking about changing his physiology starts to change him on a micro level. So after 10 times, he goes, "Okay, I did it." I said, "Yeah." So here's my question. "You did 10 perfect swings?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Did you ever think about your wrist during any one of those swings?" He said, "No." I said, "All your focus is on your wrist. How are you ever going to get back to it if that's not what you do when you're at your best?" He goes, "Well, what do I do?" I said, "It's not what you do, it's the state you're in. We got to put you back in the state." How many of you have been in that state where things just flow for you? The words come through, you hit the ball, who knows what I'm talking about here? Say "I." If you've ever done that more than one time, then your unconscious mind knows how to do it. Your conscious mind just doesn't know how to trigger it. So I figure out how to trigger it so you can do it at will every time. And we're going to do this with you. So what did I do with it? I'm old enough to remember something many of you are not ancient enough to remember. But there was a time in which we actually viewed things on something called VHS tapes. Is there anyone ancient enough to remember this old technology? A lot of ancient people in this room. So I thought I was cool. I had this little portable TV that had a VHS built into it. It was the hottest technology. I rolled this big ass thing out. I put it in front of him and I show him a video first of when he won at Wimbledon. And here's what he does. You see him walk out on the court the day he won. He walks out like this. He takes the ball and bounces like this and bounces like this. And then all of a sudden he did something I hadn't seen. He takes his racket, he puts it in the same hand with the ball. He used to wear a baseball cap because in those days he had this thing called hair. How many remember Andre with his big ponytail, right? He got his big ponytail, he puts it up here, looks at the guy like this, puts his hand under his ponytail, goes, and as he's watching, he starts to grin from ear to ear. Totally changed the state, right? I said, "Do you remember that moment?" He goes, "Of course I remember that moment." I said, "First of all, look at how you walked on the court. I mean, you were prowling. You were walking like you own that court. And then you bounce like this." And I said, "What is this thing? What is that?" He goes, "I don't know. It just felt good." And I said, "Well, that's awesome." I said, "So we see what you did with your physiology." How many follow this? Say "I." So that changed your biochemistry, put you in a state of peak performance. But then what were you focused on? Do you remember that? He goes, "I remember vividly." He said, "I was looking at him thinking, why did you even show up?" How's that for certainty? So I said, "Okay, now he's like on fire." So I pull out the VHS tape. I put in a new one, and it's him at the French Open. And it's when he got annihilated. And he walks out on the court like this. This is his walk. Kind of like, what's that guy from Mr. Roper from Three's Company or something, right? You know, and he bounces the ball like this. And he looks at the guy, and I freeze frame it like this. He's like, I said, do you remember that moment? He goes, yes, I remember that moment. I said, who is this idiot walking out here? It's not the same man. How many follow? Right? Different biochemistry, different human, different certainty. Listen, in sports, in business, in marketing, and selling, and marketing, and children, in life, and in relationships, certainty rules. If two people have respect and rapport, you need that first. If there's rapport and respect, the person who's most certain will influence the other person always. And in athletics, the person who has the most certainty will execute at the higher level. It's not knowledge, it's not ability, it's execution. And state controls execution. So he saw that, and I said, then, do you remember what you're focusing on? He goes, I remember. I was looking at that guy, I remember the last two times he beat me, and thinking, I can't go through this again. See, physiology and focus, 2 F's. They're not actually F's, but it sounds good. Physiology and focus. If you change either one of them, how fast can you change your state, my friends? How fast?
What Tony has to say about certainty, or the belief that you will accomplish what you set out to do, no matter what is happening in the external world, applies not only to achieving success in sports, but anything in life. If you develop the absolute sense of certainty that powerful beliefs provide, you can get yourself to accomplish the seemingly impossible. But how do you achieve certainty in yourself? One of those ways is momentum. Now, what you're about to hear is not Tony talking to seminar clients, and it's not him talking to a group of athletes at halftime. He is in Dubai, speaking to heads of state, CEOs, world leaders, policymakers, and global influencers of change and progress. These are the people who are trying to figure out solutions for the many problems that we as global citizens must tackle. How to ensure that everyone, everywhere, has access to an extraordinary quality of life. So listen carefully, because the principle he explains here at the World Government Summit is something you can use to achieve results in your own life.
Energy makes the difference in everything. So if we want to see a way to shift energy, I'm sure you've seen this in sports. I work with a lot of sports athletes and teams. I've worked with everybody from Michael Jordan, the Golden State Warriors, if you're familiar with that group, football players, hockey players, every place. This last year I worked with 2 world championship teams, one in hockey, the Capitals that won the NHL championship, and the Golden State Warriors, who, if you know the NBA, won the NBA. I've worked with them the last 4 years. When you work with teams, you see this thing called momentum, and momentum is what government rarely gets. Successful governments or successful leaders know how to take and create a momentum. How many have noticed that certain people in a sport get